This video is brought to you by Describe. This is the next installment in my series about the many different forms of character creation. In this series, I highlight different starting points you might take when you begin making your character, and then I create a character using that approach. Today we're talking about multiclassing. What does it look like when you create a character with the goal of combining two different classes? But before we get into that, I just want to highlight that I have a Discord server where a bunch of amazing people hang out, and they've built a really wonderful community. And right now, as I'm recording this, the mods are doing amazing work to improve the experience for the members. And we're open to feedback. We want to know how to create the best experience for all. Be respectful, of course, even if you may not agree with the mods. Remember, they're human beings. Treat them like you'd treat me. But we would love for you to join up and give us your feedback about how to make our Discord server the best Discord server in the hobby. And then we can finally begin phase 2. We march on all the other Discord servers and conquer them in the name of the Super Geek Nation. Oops, shoot, sorry, I wasn't supposed to reveal that much of the roadmap yet. Pretend you didn't hear that. Anyway, join my Discord server, it's great. Now, on with the show. Now today we're talking about starting with a multi-classed character, but this is not necessarily the same thing as starting with a specific build. That's definitely a valid approach, and one we'll talk about another day, but I know lots of people have a plan for how many levels of each class they're going to take, with the goal of optimizing it so specific subclasses and maybe feats and spells can all synergize to achieve one specific vision. But that's both a much broader topic and a more specific approach, so it's something we'll discuss another day. Because there are a bunch of reasons you might want to multiclass. Sure, sometimes it's for the build, or for some specific mechanical benefit, but other times it's for the story. Or maybe it's just a thought exercise or an experiment to see what you'll wind up with. And again, none of these approaches are more or less valid than the others, as long as you're having fun. Now, I often don't multiclass, but I have played a couple of multiclassed characters. One of them was a swashbuckler rogue who eventually took a couple of levels of fighter, but I didn't have a strong opinion about that. I was basically just encouraged to dip into fighter rather than pursuing higher levels of rogue, because they would make me more effective in combat. The other character was created from Jump Street to be multiclassed, but I only played that character for about an hour. A few years ago, we were running a sequel campaign to another game we'd already run, but my character had not survived the previous campaign. They had died in the finale. So, unlike the other cast members, I needed to create somebody new. Now, in the epilogue for the original campaign, one of the other characters had adopted a bugbear and named him Timothy. Fun fact, the player meant to say owlbear, but they misspoke, but they rolled with it. Like, yeah, okay, I meant owlbear, but I said bugbear, so my character adopted a bugbear child, I guess. So when we were preparing for the sequel game, I talked to my GM and I said, hey, I don't really want to play this character for the new campaign. I have a stronger idea for my actual player character for this game. But it would be fun if the other players thought I was playing Timothy the Bugbear. I'll just play him for the intro session, and then when the adventure starts in earnest, we can instead bring in my real character in whatever way makes the most sense. So I rolled up a bugbear who had 4 levels of druid, because the PC who adopted him was a druid, 3 levels of paladin, because the druid's love interest was a paladin PC, and 4 levels of rogue, because you're not my real dad. And yeah, obviously he was a joke character. He was honestly a mechanical nightmare. I put absolutely no energy into making his stats synergize in any way at all. I'm sure I could have found some sort of combination of those classes that would have been fun in the long term, but that was not really important to me in this case. Timothy the Bugbear was only going to participate in one fight, and so the fun and novelty of the character could carry him through that combat. If I'd kept playing him, then I think his inability to contribute in any meaningful way probably would have wound up dragging down combats and making them less fun for everyone. Thankfully, that wasn't an issue for our campaign, but it would be on my mind if I joined a campaign with a multi-classed character I hope to play for a lot longer. This also brings up another point. Kind of by definition, you won't be using this approach where you start with 2 classes if you're playing a level 1 character. Now, plenty of people create their level 1 character with a goal for what they want to do with every level up all the way to level 20, but again, I feel like that's something we're going to cover more when we talk about starting with a specific build in mind. And it may be possible that you start at level 1 with only a plan to go into 2 specific classes, but nothing more than that. But in general, it is much more common for you to create a multi-class character when you know you're sitting down to play a higher level game. Lots of people do start their campaigns at level 3 because they want to jump to the levels where the players unlock their subclasses. So if that's the case for your game, you might create a multi-class character. We even saw that with the beginning of Campaign 3 of Critical Role. They started at level 3, and sure enough, one of the players did start the game with a multi-classed character. I've also seen some games open at level 5, since that's when players get 3rd level spells, and that's when the game leaves behind a lot of the lethality of lower levels and fully shifts into heroic fantasy mode instead. In fact, the timing of this video might be really useful. We're a little bit less than a month away from the release of Vecna Eve of Ruin, which is specifically an adventure for levels 10 to 20. So some of you might actually be about to sit down at the table with some brand new level 10 characters. Regardless, for our purposes today, we're going to assume this character isn't being created to be a level 1 adventurer, but was instead created for a game where everybody is a bit higher level. Now, starting at higher levels may not be your preference, and there could be a few reasons for that. Maybe you want to start at level 1 so you have a little bit more time to get familiar with the mechanics, which is fair enough. But there's also a chance you just don't know how to narratively describe all of your cool higher level abilities, like all of the spells you've got, or how your character brandishes their weapons in combat. And if that's the case, then you don't need to worry about that at all, because you can find everything you need by signing up for today's sponsor, Describe. Describe has thousands of descriptions of locations, monsters, NPCs, magic items, other realities, anything you could want a description for. But they also have some scenes that are perfect for the player to read aloud at the table. For example, maybe you're looking for a description for casting a spell like Steel Wind Strike. Flourishing my weapon, I speak the words of power. The spell blasts from my mouth to coalesce around the blade. In a gust of wind, I vanish, darting around the room, striking at those within my reach. When the wind dies, I am standing, weapon in hand, right next to one of my targets. Or maybe you're looking for dialogue you can read aloud at the table to help you get into the mind of a character you haven't had a chance to run since level 1. And thankfully, they actually do have dialogue snippets you can drop into your game, like a quip a barbarian might make about friendship. Each of you is truly my friend. For you, I would crush skulls and sever tendons. I mean it. That guy over there, you want me to crush him? Bathe in his blood? I will do it. For friendship. And you can get thousands of scenes like this if you sign up for Describe. And the fine folks at Describe are offering a discount to the viewers of this channel. If you visit describe.com/supergeek and use the promo code SUPERGEEK at checkout, you can save 10% off of your first subscription payment. Once again, that's dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code SUPERGEEK for 10% off. Thank you so much to Describe for sponsoring this video. So now we're going to go over to D&D Beyond, and we're going to create a character starting with the idea of blending two classes together. That's the entire starting point we're going to use. So let's go see what we can come up with. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to randomly determine what classes we're going to be working with today. And I'm doing it randomly because I don't want to feel tempted to go to specific builds. We're going to randomly determine what level we're starting at, and then we're going to randomly determine what classes we're doing. 7. Okay, we're creating a level 7 character. That's a good number of levels in each respective class. That'll give us some room to play with. It's on the high end, too, which is interesting. Okay, we have at least one level of Paladin. And actually, I don't know which one's going to be our default. So I don't know which one we're going to start with. We'll figure that out in a minute. And then we're going to do 7. So, which is actually 6, which is Fighter. Okay, Paladin and Fighter mixed. Not a terribly strange combination. Here's the problem with this specific combination for the purposes here is I'm trying to figure out how to make this like an interesting character and like derive a lot from it. And I don't feel like we're getting a ton of information from the fighter aspect of it, unless we go with a subclass, which does give us something to work with. So the question is this. The question is which one is our default class, right? Which did we start with? And that's going to determine, because a lot of people are saying, oh, they were a fighter who became a paladin later on, which is absolutely an option. I'm wondering what it looks like if we start with paladin and go to fighter. I don't care about mechanics. I'm thinking story-wise. Is that interesting? I'm just going to roll. I'm going to roll randomly to determine what the starting class is. Because, specifically, I don't care about builds. I don't care about the math or the mechanics. So we're combining a paladin and a fighter just to get the story of it. I don't care about specific builds. I don't care which is like... I would want to find a good balance between them, but for the purposes of today, I don't know what that looks like. So just trying to create a character. Exactly. Zippo Mage, is this going to be a paladin who lost their faith? Or, you know, becomes a... Yeah, okay. So we're going to do odds. We're starting with the fighter. Evens, we're starting with the paladin. Okay. If we start with the paladin, that's really interesting. You know, it's very easy and I think interesting to say, oh, we start with somebody who is a fighter and then they found faith later on. And I've played characters like that before. I think that's really interesting to play. But wouldn't it be also interesting if they were a former member of a divine faith? And they were like a former paladin of some sort. And then they later on lost their faith. Give them decent religion, and we'll give them decent insight. because they had some sort of revelation or realization that caused them to abandon their faith. I mean, one of the examples I use for the paladin in the video I made about core fantasies is Phoebus from Hunchback of Notre Dame, where he like literally breaks away from, he doesn't break away from his faith. He breaks away from the orders being given by the religious leader. I guess Judge Frollo isn't technically a religious leader. He's more of a city official, but you know, he certainly doesn't think of himself that way in the film anyway. But if you go a little bit more, like if you have them sort of break with faith in some other way, I think that's kind of interesting. Yeah, you have somebody who had a former life in their past that they're sort of abandoning, which is so opposite of what I usually play. I mean, I just started a Baldur's Gate run where my character is based on a D&D character I've played before who was a cleric who used to be, she wasn't mechanically anything else, but narratively she used to be a criminal. And then she turned to a life of goodness. And similarly, we had the same thing with a character I played for a one-shot. It was like a horror one-shot, and it was, again, he was like in his background, he was like a fighter or a barbarian or something. I didn't mechanically represent that, but narratively I had him be a paladin who had, you know, who had basically converted all his levels, essentially, because they'd found faith. And I think with both of those characters, there's something appealing about taking a character who, I was evoking Saul a lot from the Bible story. Saul who, like, it persecutes people and then is struck blind by God and then like has a revelation and becomes like the most zealous God fan. I'm generalizing, but you understand what I'm saying. And taking the idea of that character, and a character I've played in a lot of different variations of, which is, this is someone who has a troubled past and is now trying to do better. So we have that also with like the wizard I played for 20 levels, who was a charlatan and a con man who's like becoming a better person. This is kind of the opposite of that. I mean, it might be, I mean, it depends what the deity is. It's possible that they were also serving an evil deity, but let's assume for a moment that we're still keeping with that knight in shining armor backstory. They were a paladin, and they were well regarded and well respected, and they broke away from that because they became disillusioned. Sort of the reverse of what I always play with so many of my characters. Carlos Zepeda, can't a paladin just finish a quest and lose his powers? I mean, it is possible that, it depends on your game. You know, I could always say, like, oh, well, they're still getting powers from something. That's an interesting question, right? Is, like, how do we represent that narratively? Like, yeah, so that is a good question. It ultimately, I mean, the question of whether or not you take powers away from a paladin is kind of a different question, right? Is, like, how much do you punish players for narrative? And that's something we'll talk about a lot more as Critical Role goes on, as people experiment with that. And we'll talk about that more on the channel in the future. And I have more videos coming up about players' relationships with gods and all that, and all the stuff we can play with there. But in this case, it's a good point. They are still a paladin. Did they actually lose faith in the deity, or did they simply break away from the organization and the structures of it? You know, is there something rotten in the organization? That, I think, is interesting. And that gives us something to play with, and it gives us plot hooks to give to our GM. Right? It's just to say that someone in the faith is not who they claim to be, or not serving their role responsibly or respectfully. So this person like went off on their own, abandoning that, but still serving either a deity or the same deity in their own way. Zippo, you're a genius. What did Zippo say? Oh, Ahsoka situation. Blamed for a perceived crime and disenfranchised when the order they pledged to sided with local judiciary instead of backing them up. Yeah, I don't quite want to go that way because I kind of like more the idea that they left because of their own loss of faith in the sense of loss of trust. They no longer believe that the organization is holding to their ideals. Without getting into, like, the legal aspect of it. That's a great way to take this character. Not quite where I want to go with it, but just because of what I would want to explore with the character. But it's another very interesting way to go. You could just do Ahsoka. I mean, Ahsoka kind of is this to a degree. Yeah, Unkillable, that's a good point. Crown could be good if the good ruler died and an evil one took over. And there's a good excuse through that one to kind of get them back into... It lends itself well to new antagonists. And to various tiers of antagonists and rivals and things, right? People from their old Oh my god, it's Captain America. We are describing Captain America at the beginning of Infinity War. I don't do this on purpose. But that is essentially what Oath of the Crown is, right? The Oath of the Crown is sworn to the ideals of civilization, be it the spirit of a nation, fealty to a sovereign, or service to the deity of law and rulership. The paladins who swear this oath dedicate themselves to serving society, and in particular, the just laws that hold society together. These paladins are watchful guardians on the walls, standing against the chaotic tides of barbarism that threaten to tear down all the civilization has built, and are commonly known as guardians, exemplars, or sentinels. Often, paladins who swear this oath are members of an order of knighthood and service to a nation or a sovereign and undergo their oath as part of their admission to the order's ranks. Even if they've lost faith in their oath, it's not because of the ideals they strive for, it's because of what's currently happening. Kind of like a Ronin Samurai as well, which is why I'm kind of leaning towards we might go with Samurai for this. Because it lends itself so well sort of thematically. Samurai is appealing. Cavalier is also really interesting. Many of these fighters leave their lives of comfort to embark on a glorious adventure. That's kind of exactly what we're talking about. You get fine steed through being a paladin, which means you always have access to your animal. Yeah, I'm going to go Cavalier. I think that makes the most sense, and it's also mechanically really good. Oh, that's a good point. Paladin level 5 also gives you new spells. Yeah, but narratively speaking, I'm gonna stick with what... Oh, wait. What level is Fine Steed? This build might not work yet. Hold on. Just make him level 8. Who cares what the dice say? The dice are representing us sitting down as if we're playing a game, right? Like as if this is what the GM has said. So that's why I chose that number somewhat arbitrarily. Is as if the GM said, hey, everyone sit down. We're making a level 7 characters. 4 levels of Paladin. 3 levels of Fighter, because I want to get the Cavalier features. And right now they can just have a horse. Right? And then as they level up, they can take a level of Paladin and start getting things like Fine Steed. It just means that we're going down the Paladin route more. So I think this character basically had a long dark night of the soul where they were wrestling with what is my relationship like with my nation and with my leadership and with my rulers. And so now they've kind of come out the other side of it. They're ready to start taking class levels in Paladin again, if, when they next level up, because that gets them some spells and things. But it allows them to have dipped into fighter both narratively and mechanically. So they're going to get Fine Steed when they level up next. Oh, it's funny, I'm mentioning Captain America, which kind of brings us back to the legal discrepancy that we had when we were talking about Ahsoka. Because Captain America also fled because he was accused of breaking the law. Although in fairness, he did do it. He just didn't care. Yeah, I'm debating going with the Knight instead. I know that means more NPCs that have to be created, but I just think it makes more sense. I'm kind of feeling like he's a member of, and maybe this is just because I'm watching episodes of the, Vox Machina that are about the Chroma Conclave arc, but I'm kind of leaning towards him being a member of like the I almost said Tiamat, of the Bahamut organization. Ooh, Zephy, that's an interesting question. Can't the Knight cohort be a horse? Or is that a Pathfinder thing? Knight background gives you a servant for your horse. Oh, that's true. About having a sidekick / retainer. My loyalty to the ideals of my nation is unwavering. Wow. Okay. What do I need to do next? Race. I mean, I'm leaning toward human, to be completely honest, because I just tend to assume and imagine that the humans are the members of the main, or is this a Dragonborn? That could be fun. I'm just gonna roll a d10. 1 through 5 is gonna be one of the chromatic, 6 through 10 is gonna be one of the metallic, and I'll just select it that way. The gem dragons just don't excite me, to be completely honest. Yeah, silver, Dragonborn, choose. Can I get a, oh, you're right. Can I get a lance at this level? I'm sure I can. Lance. Yeah, it's 10 gold. I'll just deduct it from the starting gold. Oh, and someone also says whip. I have the horse. That's my whip. Is that a good joke? Do kids still say whip when they're talking about a car? Does that still work? And they just need a name. Ladder lady. I know, I was debating that too. I'm so thinking of this character as male throughout this process that it's hard for me to shake that now. just because all of these influences for me are Captain America, Phoebus, all these things are male characters, so it's really hard for me to shake that idea. Captain Balazar Silverwing. Captain Silverwing. I think that works. That's the character. I think the tough thing is the next thing we need to figure out is what happened. But that's really difficult to do without a sense of what the community is like that they were a part of, right? And talking to the GM about like, okay, what did they do that basically made him lose his faith in this organization? And that is something that I would talk to the GM about. I would say, hey, this is what I want to do with the character. What do you think is reasonable? Because they might say like, listen, I don't want to have this organization have been doing, the stuff that happened. We've been mentioning Hunchback of Notre Dame a lot in this video. We don't want to necessarily say that, oh, they've been out there routing out people trying to track down, Romani equivalents. We don't want to necessarily go that route. What can we find that's like a nice middle ground? And we might land on something like what we discussed earlier, which is more of what happened with Ahsoka or Captain America, where, they violated a law or were perceived as violating a law, and they just had no support from their organization. They got thrown under the bus. That's a reasonable option, but I like it more that there's more a sense of corruption there and sort of like the decay of honoring their goals and objectives. So that is, I think, something we would figure out with our GM, but that's a character that I'm really excited about. I think that would be a lot of fun to play. Look, for the record, it's not my fault that I keep creating Captain America as my D&D characters. It's Captain America's fault for being an archetype that I find endlessly fascinating and fun to explore. But zooming out, I think you can see how I tried to make some choices that would give the GM a lot to work with. This character is on the outs with the rulers of his nation and the leadership of his religious order, but it's somewhat inevitable he'll wind up interacting with people from that organization or that nation. Some of those folks might understand why he left. Others might not. Some of those who don't might be willing to hear Balazar out, but others might be antagonists, or at the very least, rivals. Additionally, Balazar has likely done some things that had some victims because he thought nobody innocent was going to be harmed, but he was wrong. So there may still be some victims out there that he can cross paths with, and they might feel any kind of way about him. And I think that's really interesting. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Bolin in Season 4 of The Legend of Korra. It's kind of this person who thought they were doing the right thing, but now they're finding out that all this rhetoric was a lie. And all of that came about because we randomly picked a couple of classes and randomly picked the order of them and used that as our guideline to start making this character. If I was making this character for a real game, I'd work out the details with my GM, but at least now we know the basics. And of course, like I always say, whenever I create these characters for this series, you probably had at least a couple of moments in this process where you had another idea. Maybe you had an idea for other classes or subclasses that pair well together, and we will talk about starting with a character build another time, something that's more specifically strategic. Or maybe you wanted to start with a fighter and transition to a paladin because it feels more like somebody discovering their faith. Maybe you had other ideas for subclasses. Maybe you had a different idea for the character's backstory or ancestry or gender or name. And that's the point. Each character creation process we talk about in these videos is always just a jumping off point. Any of these methods are only useful if they help you come up with a character concept. And maybe you'll give this method a try yourself. We got really lucky with the role. Paladins and fighters have a lot of common ground, so it wouldn't be hard to make them synergize mechanically or thematically. But you also don't have to roll randomly. You can pick two classes that you think might be fun or interesting or dynamic if they get paired up together. So let me know in the comments. Have you ever created a character starting with combining a few classes? How many levels of each did they start with? And how did those classes help to inspire the character's backstory or personality? Also, the link for this character sheet is in the description below, along with the sheets for every character I've created for this series. They're up on my Patreon for free, so go download them there if you're curious to take any of these characters for a spin. Thank you so much for watching. We've only got a few more of these videos before the new version of 5e comes out, so I'm probably going to tackle the idea of creating a character based on a build pretty soon. So if you've got a build you'd like to see me use as inspiration for a character in this series, let me know in the comments below. And let me know, do you want me to use a build in this version of 5e or wait until the new version comes out and build a build based on a cold read of the new system? Again, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell. It appeases the dragon god that is the algorithm. Support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to help me pay for diapers. They're not for me. We're having a baby. Join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people and share in a really cool community, and follow my newsletter for updates when I remember to send them out. Click here for a video about how I prep for my D&D games. I think that video is really useful for anybody considering running their own games. Until next time, play fair and have fun.